Now I'm looking around the congregation and thinking to myself, I need to be careful on this first question. Because I suspect some of you know the answer. How many of you know what an idiom is? Just raise your hand if you know what an idiom is. Just the people I thought. Keep quiet now. How many of you know what an idiom is? An idiom, not an idiot, an idiom. Winston said at the first service, I do, it's a stupid person. Wrong, Winston. An idiom. We use them all the time. In fact, I challenge or invite some of you, those of you who like these kinds of things and maybe a little gamemanship, to count the number of idioms I use in this sermon. What's an idiom? Let me share a few. You know, sometimes you just act like a fish out of water. You're barking up the wrong tree. Bite the bullet. Or go break a leg. Now, some are thinking, get on with the message, stop beating around the bush. Okay. We use idioms all the time, and if you are counting, you're already up to about 5. We use idioms all the time. A familiar one that was very popular a few years ago, at least I would call it an idiom, is whatever. Whatever. Which is a word that can be interpreted as, I'm just over it, I don't care, get on with it. Some of you are probably thinking that in regards to my message. Just get on with the sermon. And in response to that, I say, whatever. Okay. Idioms are interesting because they're very short phrases, a few words, but they contain a huge, huge message, right? A huge message. They share a thought or a feeling without having to go into specifics or details. We just get it. And sometimes they get us into trouble because obviously we say them, like whatever, and it's interpreted maybe not the way that we think or want it to be interpreted. And yet, they are useful, and we use them. Jesus' parables, although they're not categorized as idioms, kind of are that way, because a true parable, not a metaphor or just an illustration, but a true parable needs no explanation. I don't have to stand and tell it. It's not like a bad joke that you have to explain. You just get it. You can walk away. You're done. You're really thick-headed if you don't, because it's just so crystal clear. You don't need transition or a translation. Like it or not, Jesus' parables are what they are, or as people like to say, it is what it is, which is another idiom. In fact, it is my favorite and most intriguing idiom of the day. I like it is what it is. Why? Because when you say that, or at least when I say it, it means let's stop wasting time. It is what it is. It is what it is. It's really simple. Accept what happened, learn from what happened, and get on with your life. It just makes sense. It is what it is. I can't do anything about it. It's over, said, and done. It is water under the bridge. Right? What we could have or should have done, we just need to own that we did it or we didn't do it. It's done. And then fix what we can and move on. What we need to fix, to keep going, to do better, to become better. That's really the object, isn't it? Or it should be. Why cry over spilled milk? It accomplishes nothing. It just weighs us down, and eventually it wears us out. Some things are regrettable. Some things are regrettable, but they're not fixable. Other things are great, but they are not repeatable. They just are. It is what it is. Little Johnny. You ever heard of Little Johnny? Little Johnny, Big Johnny said it's time for Little Johnny to go to Sunday school and to church. And so, Big Johnny took Little Johnny and dropped him off at church. And Little Johnny stayed for the whole worship service, and he got picked up by his dad. When he got into the car, Big Johnny said, "How did you get that black eye?" And, well, Little Johnny was known for being a little rambunctious and causing trouble where there needn't be some. He says, "Dad, I do not know. It was the most unfortunate thing. Mrs. Gritchen was sitting ahead of me, and at the end of the service, when she stood up, I could tell that her skirt was kind of pinched in her behind, and that had to be uncomfortable, so I reached up and I grabbed it and I pulled it out, and she turned around and hit me in the eye." Big Johnny said, "Well, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't touch people. Next week when you go back, behave yourself." So Little Johnny was taken to church the following week, and every time Mrs. Gritchen stood up in front of him, her skirt was kind of wedged the way it was before. And having made a promise to his dad, he didn't touch it, he didn't touch it, he didn't touch it. And then when she stood up for the benediction, he noticed that it was out and it was flat. And he says, "Well, it's obvious that she doesn't like it that way, so I'll tuck it back in." That's when Johnny got his second black eye. Okay, seriously, most of the things we know were learned from mistakes, from doing it wrong, and learning how to do it right, to do it better, to act right, to be better. Seriously, you fail a test in school, you can evaluate how you didn't prepare for that test till the cows come home. But why obsess? Why obsess? It's over and it's done. Right? The best you can do is try to do it better, learn to do it better, and then do better. And maybe that's the best you can do, but you know what? It doesn't pay to just keep hashing things over. This is what frustrates me so much. We started out with, what was it, 10 years ago, Sandy Hook and the shootings, right? 10 years ago. 10 years ago, and we're still, the first question asked is, well, I want to know the motivation of the shooter. I want to know the motivation of the shooter, and I'm thinking to myself, give it up. Is that really what you should be focusing on? Why they did what they did? And I hate the fact that now they're saying it's people with mental illnesses, because that just about includes everybody. No, I'm serious. People struggle with stuff all the time, and so let's just blame them for that too. But my point is, we spend so much time analyzing and rehashing and going over and over, and in the meantime, it's been 10 years. And from being a tragic experience that shocked us, I turn on the television every night, and it is a daily thing. It's a daily thing. One of the first things you learn in life, if you're a minister and you want to last in the business for 40 years, when an idea comes up that you really don't want to move forward, you put it in committee. You give it to a committee, and what the committee will do is talk about it till it dies, goes away. We have such serious things to deal with that involve people's lives, and we just keep sending it to committee rather than saying, look, I cannot drive and go somewhere looking in my rearview mirror all the time. The motive is important, I get that, but it is not the focus. The focus is, how do we save children's lives? This is something that the Bible repeats as an approach to life many times. If you know your Old Testament, you know the story of Jacob and Esau. Jacob stole the birthright of his older brother Esau. The older brother, it was rightfully his, and Jacob got together with his mother and fooled their father, who was basically blind. And at that point, happened what you would expect to happen. Esau gets angry. The older brother's angry, and Jacob runs away. To get away, he's afraid. So for years, Esau is planning revenge, and Jacob's hiding in fear. And then eventually, you have the story where they say enough is enough, and they meet and they get together. And you know what happens? Well, let me tell you what doesn't happen. They don't rehash the past. They don't rehash the past. They say, let's put that behind us. Let's be brothers and let's move ahead. And if that doesn't give you some theological basis upon which to provide credibility for what I'm trying to say, this is the notion of grace with God, that God does give us chance after chance, again and again. But there was a time when Moses had to remind God of this. Let me refer you to Exodus 34. Moses comes down from Mount Sinai. He's got these 10 commandments, and he finds the Hebrew people dancing around a golden idol they have made, and Moses smashes the 10 commandments out of his anger, and God's upset too. And God takes Moses aside and he says, guess what, Moses? I am sick of these stubborn, stiff-necked people. I'm going to fry them. And Moses says, whoa, wait a minute. Stop, think about what you're doing. If you act that way towards your people, who you've said are your people, how does that make you different from any other god? And you know what the text says? The text says God changed God's mind. In fact, it says, and this will really... I know you'll want to go home and find this for yourselves. It says, God repented of what God was going to do. What is. What still can be is where we must be focused. And I think this text we have from Romans that Paul provides for us, at least as I read it at this point in time, texts always, what they say to you always depends upon the context in which you read them. But when you look at this text and follow along, you have it. It says, through Christ, we have obtained access by faith into grace. It doesn't say it's automatic. It says it's there. We've gained access. The door is open. The opportunity is there. And we stand in that place. And he continues, moreover, it is this grace that keeps us going. It enables us to rejoice even in our sufferings. Our biggest problems and our mistakes. It helps us to even give thanks for those, because we know that these create the opportunity for endurance. And that strengthens us and creates within us a better character. And that if we stick by it, it is a wellspring for hope. And this hope never shames us. Rather, it improves and empowers us to work harder in order that we can become the best version of each of us. People will say, well, how can you rejoice in bad stuff? Well, that doesn't mean you give it an okay or you like it, but there is always that search that says every situation can be redeemed, that none of these things are beyond God's grace, and maybe you just ought to sit still long enough to see where God will lead you and what God has to say. It's no secret, I have a chronic illness, and I know other people in the congregation have the same, or you've had cancer or something, and I have the choice every day to get up and be grumpy, and my wife would very definitely say that I fulfill that sometimes. But it becomes, you look at that and you say, well, is this where I'm going to focus? Is this where I'm going to choose myself? Because what I can say to you is the gift I have been given out of that thing, that situation, that illness, that frustration, is that it has enabled me to see another whole side of life that I would not seen elsewhere. The underside of life, the backstory of life, which is the everyday life of a lot of people. All of a sudden, when you have something like this, all of a sudden you are on the outside. You're on the periphery of the mainstream. You know why people want elevators. You know why ramps are important, where before you'd say, oh, they can find a place to get up. All of a sudden you see something you wouldn't have seen before, and for that I have to rejoice. Because it makes me a better pastor. It makes me a better pastor. I still fail, but I think I'm more sensitive. It's often said that the only real loser in life is the person who gives up. Okay. But I would say we only become losers in life when choosing to live our lives in a cul-de-sac instead of a through street. Mull on that, chew on that. Living our lives in a cul-de-sac, around, and around, and around, and around, and around. Get on with it, Keith. Are you nauseous yet? Because that's what it makes you after a while. And you go around and around and it gets you nowhere, and then people say, how did we get here? Well, it's pretty obvious. You've been doing this dance for a long time. Why don't you get out of the cul-de-sac, on a through street, onto an on-ramp, and find the interstate that takes you somewhere? Did you hear, this is not in my notes, but you hear on the news this week about a pill now that's been extremely successful with breast cancer? Now, it's still in the beginning stages, but they sound extremely hopeful that it will be for more than just that. But you think about, those are people that knock their heads against the wall day after day after day, and they give thanks like Edison did. Well, that's 99 different ways I know I can't make a light bulb. Everyone here knows the definition of an idiot, not an idiom now, an idiot, right? An idiot is someone who does the same thing again and again and expects different results. So why do we do it? Why do we allow those who lead us to do it? Why don't we latch on to different people, those who share an idiom that really could make a difference? An idiom that we are all familiar that says, why don't you pick up your cross and follow me? Pick up your cross, no risk, no gain. No risk, no reward, no pain, no gain, right? I came so that you could know what it means to live a good and abundant life, Jesus said. Translated in today's sermon, that is, take a chance. Jesus says, take a chance on me. I invite you to join with me in the pastoral prayer. Oh God, in a world that seems to have gone or lost its way, we come to you, not just seeking answers, but seeking strength and courage and persistence for the days ahead. Help us to live our sights, as the psalmist said, into the hills from whence our strength comes. We struggle with questions that seem to have answers and problems that have insurmountable solutions, and they've led us to be deeply divided. I'm not sure what we're trying to protect that we can't let go and move on. But as we look and listen to people around the world, this seems to be a condition of humanity in these days. Surely, God, we must test your patience. But we know that your love is all-encompassing, never-ending, always forgiving, and this is where we lay our hope, because We know your love is conditional, and we know your forgiveness forever if we are sincere in our seeking it, thus making our hope not false but realistic, not putting us to shame. Excuse me. Oh God, this week, today, this morning, we lift up the people who have suffered losses because of the violence that seems so rampant in our world. We pray for them, simply that they can have the strength to go on. I cannot even imagine walking in their shoes. But we hope that our prayers might also be for those people who could make a difference if they so choose. To try to put into place things that move us forward rather than living in the cul-de-sac of decisions that have held us back. Today, O God, we ask your blessing on those who are role models for us, for parents, for grandparents, for memories of the past that we hope to pass on to children of today and tomorrow. We lift up those in this congregation who have been sick or have lost loved ones who are hurting in any way, and we ask that you give them peace and strength to face their days. We pray for strength for the addicted, comfort for those who are victims of violence, and help us to find ways to feed the hungry, especially those, we are so mindful of those in the Ukraine. But God, we also lift up those who are the bullies, persons who are perpetrators of harm, those who feel the need to put others down through name-calling. For these too need your love. Use people around them to show them a different way of living, a different path, a path that leads to goodness and hope. Oh God, we ask that you help us to be faithful agents of change in this world. Give us courage to speak out about our faith, to teach those around us about your love, and to lead by example, showing and speaking with respect to others. These things we ask in the name of the one we call the Prince of Peace, who taught his disciples in the past and present to pray by saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. A few weeks back, we reintroduced the offertory here, so if you would like to leave an offering at this time, you can. But also encourage you or remind you that, you can do it online or using the QR code or whatever. Did anybody count the number of idioms? I'm just curious.